It's Kim Brown from the Christian Renewal Center. It's time for your mini retreat, Saintly Saturday Sunday with Katherine Drexel, one of the American saints. She's her stained glass window is in Marion Hall. You can check her out. And we got her relic here with us as well. Second class relic gifted to us from the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament, the religious order she founded, as well as some of the roof top from her mother house that was located in Bensalem. Now, her mother house is no longer under the control of the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament, but Katherine Drexel was a force to be reckoned with. She came from unbelievable wealth and she gave it up to become a sister, but then she still was able to use her family wealth for such good. So what are the 5 spiritual lessons we can take away on this Saintly Saturday from Saint Katherine Drexel? First is to recognize your own wealth. Now, you and I might not be an heiress and we might not be gifted millions and millions of dollars from our parents, but what is the wealth that you have? Maybe it is financial wealth. Maybe it is a wealth of time. You know, so often when I encounter people that have retired, they have an abundance of time for the first time in their life. What are you doing with the wealth that you've been given, right? So if you have financial resources, are you using that to build your own kingdom? Or are you using that to build God's kingdom? I'm always very aware of the story in the Old Testament of Solomon, how many years it took and how great the temple was. But the palace that Solomon built for himself was twice as big and twice as good. Are you building your kingdom or God's kingdom? Recognize your own wealth and use that wealth for building the kingdom of God. Recognize that everything you have comes from God. So entrust that to His care. So first, recognizing your own wealth and how to use that for building the kingdom of God. Second spiritual lesson we learned from St. Katherine Drexel is obedience. At one point, she felt called to religious life. She talked with her spiritual advisor and he said, Kate, you're going to be able to do more good in the world with your family's position and standing, so don't become a religious sister. In obedience, she didn't do that. Then she went and she met with the Pope on one of the trips to Rome. And when you're wealthy, sometimes you might get an appointment. And so in this meeting with the Pope, she said, listen, I've gone out, I've seen the Native Americans, I've seen the African Americans in America, and they're not being provided for. Please send a religious community to help them. And the Pope looked at her and said, you be the religious community. Hence, she was able to fulfill what she had felt earlier in that calling, but out of obedience, she did not act at one point, and now in obedience to the Pope, she did act. One of the things I think we can grow so much in is being obedience to the lawful superiors that have been placed over us, right? And this is an area that we can all grow in, but we see her obedience. And when the Pope gave her that, she went and she started the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament, and they were probably one of the most active orders our country has ever seen as far as what they did. Third spiritual principle we get from St. Katherine Drexel is to embrace the forgotten or the abandoned. She clearly saw in our country at that time the Native Americans and the African Americans who were not being ministered to. And so she embraced the underdog. She embraced those that were discarded by society. She embraced those that polite society would be like, ooh, we don't want to work with them. And that's who she embraced. Who is it that we need to embrace? You know, one of the things that I love the most whenever you go to a church, you shouldn't feel so comfortable, right? That like let me just leave everything in the pew. And I'm guilty of it, right? My iPhone that costs whatever, a couple hundred, maybe $700, not even a couple hundred anymore. But I leave it in the pew and go up for receiving communion, right? But we should sometimes feel uncomfortable as far as we should be embracing the abandoned. We should be embracing the forgotten. We shouldn't just be hanging around in circles that all look like us, all act like us, that all have the same financial standing in us. So let us go out and encounter those that are on the fringes of society like St. Katherine Drexel did, and let us serve and love them as if they are Jesus Christ like St. Katherine Drexel and her sisters did. The fourth spiritual principle we learned from St. Katherine Drexel is faith in action. It wasn't just for her to be centered on the Blessed Sacrament, which is the name of her order, but then they took the love of God in the Blessed Sacrament and they brought that love to everyone they encountered. So not only were they going to encounter Jesus Christ and those people that were abandoned, but they themselves were being Jesus Christ for him. They allowed their faith to take form into action, right? So if we spend all these hours in prayers, but we're not doing, and God's given us the physical ability to do, we really need to take some time in prayer to ask God, what is it you want me to do? So our time in being with the Lord should lead us to our time of doing. And the fifth spiritual lesson we can take away is her perseverance, especially in hardship. People tried to blow up her convent because they didn't want her helping the Black Americans, right? People did not like the work she was doing, but she persevered. She faced extreme prejudice and hatred, and she stayed course because she knew God had entrusted it to her. These are the 5 spiritual lessons of St. Katherine Drexel. God bless.